Colleagues, I think we can already start. And thank you so much for joining our discussion. When Orisa said her opening remarks in the morning, she was mentioning that Ukraine's recovery process is supposed to follow three main ideas, and I like them very much. And I think the ideas were that the recovery process should be built on trust, it should be decentralized and people-centered. So basically our discussion today is about this third principle, that the recovery should be people-centered. And for that, we have four esteemed speakers, all coming from Ukraine, all the way here. And I will introduce them following Simon's example as they speak. But before that, I will just remind you a few rules. Just remember that this discussion is on the record, that we encourage you to follow the course of the event on the Twitter using the handle CH Ukraine Forum. And also there will be the discussion with the audience later in the event. And when you will be willing to ask the question to our panelists or to raise the comment or to share the information that you have about the topic, raise your hand, but remain seated if called on, and we will have this discussion. So basically, with that, I would like to suggest that we start our discussion by watching the video. This will be the video which was developed by UNDP Ukraine on the human impact of the war. And it is informed by two major studies, the human impact assessment, that's a assessment which was conducted by 12 UN agencies working in Ukraine, operating at the country level, and also the survey impact of war on youth. And if you check the action document, which was developed specifically for this event, the action document on the human capital, you will see them both by the QR codes, and you can check for more details if you are interested. So now I'm kindly asking to show the video.
The full-scale invasion in Ukraine has displaced 1/3 of its population, severely impacting millions of people in numerous ways, physically, socially, and psychologically. 5.4 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced. More than 8 million, mostly women, have been forced to flee as refugees and protection seekers across Europe. 1.2 million Ukrainian children have been forced from their homes. This displacement has strained resources, intensifying competition for jobs and accommodation. With 2.4 million jobs lost, Ukraine's social safety net is under immense pressure. 65% of families have reported reduced income. The war is threatening education, leading to future earnings losses. Online and hybrid learning accounts for 70% of instruction today, negatively affecting the quality of education. The war is amplifying vulnerabilities. Up to 45% of Ukrainians now report belonging to a vulnerable group, such as possessing disabilities or having a chronic illness. Many of the most vulnerable are women and girls. The war has also impacted mental health. Some 15 million individuals require psychological support, of which 3 to 4 million need medication. Mental health practitioners and experts are worried about a looming mental health crisis in Ukraine. Yet, despite overwhelming adversities, Ukrainians show a strong sense of civic duty and willingness to participate in their country's recovery. Some 76% of young Ukrainians abroad want to return, with 57% saying benefiting Ukraine is one of their most important life goals. UNDP is working with its many partners to support solutions to overcome these challenges. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the people and government to build a stronger, more resilient Ukraine for generations to come.
Well, that is quite a challenge to be addressed. So I would like now to introduce you to our first speaker, Ms. Yuliia Sokolovska. She is the Deputy Head of the President's Office, and she has rich experience in working within the government of Ukraine. In previous years, she worked with the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, Ministry of Finance. She was the Minister of Social Policy herself, and now in the President's Office, she is responsible for overseeing this whole particular sector, basically rebuilding education, healthcare, proper social services for the people so that people have relevant knowledge, skills, and health to be able to contribute to the economic growth. So, Yuliia, with all this diversity of challenges that we witnessed, it's probably not the easiest job. So over to you for the opening remarks and reflections on the topic.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here in this well-organized event in the country that supported Ukraine for the whole period of time in these difficult times for Ukraine. I thank you for all the support. During these 482 unproportionally long war days, we in Ukraine usually say that people are the most important and most valuable that we have. People who fight at the battlefield, people who volunteer, who raise children, teach, save lives, who do their jobs under the shelling in the shelters and under the shelling. And we usually, but sometimes we talk a lot about this kind of events, about infrastructure, about buildings and roads, but much less about human capital, about people. And there is not that much discussion about human as a person with all their traits and weaknesses and their needs and their ambitions. And I believe Ukrainian people need this kind of voice on the different platforms. And this kind of platform I would like to use to raise this issue. I would like to open the floor for the discussions and thinking about human capital not only as a humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, but the field for investment, for innovative decisions in order to develop human capital and restore human capital in Ukraine. And in this respect, I would like to thank UNDP for organizing all the UN agencies, for working with all the national stakeholders while drafting a human impact assessment report and costing the human capital losses. In this report, it is shown how war impacted each person, what are the living conditions, whether people had access to heating and water, whether people have access to food, how war impacted the gender equality, whether people had the access to education or health services or rehabilitation or other facilities. And there is much about women empowerment, what happened during the war. Like, this is all what happened with labor market in Ukraine, how many people left Ukraine, and what will be happening with our labor market. And we'll talk more about, my colleagues will talk about this more. And with this, I would like to say that I am fortunately saying that a lot of people in Ukraine became IDPs, become war veterans, disabled people, injured. They become the victims of violence, and they became poor. And we have to think how to work with those people because everyone is needed to rebuild Ukraine. And we want to build barrier-free and inclusive society. And it is not expensive. I believe it's investments that we have to make in order to build Ukraine better, as we all say, and without people we cannot definitely do this. And with this report in this baseline, I would like to call all of us to think how to move to human capital development in a way that we can support people and invest in the people. And I would like to raise just a few moments we are working on in Ukraine. This is rehabilitation processes. We are very much moving forward with rehabilitation. We are using the best practices. We are using the WHO, the best principles to build a multidisciplinary approach in Ukraine. And this is something I also call to support Ukraine with and invest in this way. We have a lot of issues with prostheses, and we think that the unfortunately unique experience will boost this sector in Ukraine, and we call also for our local producers and for international producers to come to Ukraine and to work together with us in building our capacity in helping people who were injured during the war. We also work on social inclusion. We invest a lot in IT, in digital solutions, in helping people to get social benefits. As the report showed, more than 20% of people rely on social benefits and humanitarian aid. So we are trying as a country to be very much comfortable for people in their reaching assistance from the government and from NGOs and humanitarian organizations. Mental health, this is quite an issue, definitely, and we have the nationwide program supported by the First Lady, and I also urge you to join us in the building mental health infrastructure in Ukraine, because a huge amount of people in Ukraine need this support. I believe our task in Ukraine to become stronger by fighting, not only stronger in the battlefield, but stronger in developing our human capital. And I believe the main principle of Ukraine's recovery is that we have to have everyone on board, and we have to to put all the efforts to do this in a way of inclusivity and free barriers society. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer your questions after the speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yuliia. Thank you, and this applause is really well deserved because, colleagues, I must say the idea of this human impact assessment was initiated by Yuliia a year ago when we were not yet even back in Kiev. We were sitting in Lyvch and planning how we overcome the challenges that we are facing, and it was Yuliia who came up with the idea of assessing the impact on people and how we help people in the first place. And what I also appreciate a lot is that Yuliia is a person of action. When we came up with the draft of the Human Impact Assessment report with inputs of 12 UN agencies, we came to Yuliia and she called the closed meeting of the ministers, everybody responsible for the social sector, Minister of Education, Minister of Healthcare, Minister of Social Policy, Parliament committees responsible for the policies in this sector, and ask them to come up with the actions that they would like to put in place to address the challenges identified in this report. So I'm very much confident that we will be working in the years to come on addressing those challenges, and we invite everybody for partnership. But now let us move to what economy says. Our colleague Dmytro Lyvch is an economist with extensive experience in evidence-based policy making, sustainable development, advising the government on economic issues, on the reforms agenda. He is the CEO of Easy Business think tank. And basically, at the moment, he is working together with his team on the financial costing of the war, as well as developing the policy recommendations on rebuilding the human capital. So, Dmytro, what does the economy say?
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and I'm very happy and honored to be here in the place where actually ideas are shared, insights are gained, and perspectives are challenged. And this is a good proof. This was proved by the first panel discussion, and at least from those questions from the audience, we do understand that the human capital is essential in terms of Ukraine's recovery, and this is very important to invest. Not to spend money on human capital development, and as Ms. Sokolovska has mentioned, but to invest in human capital development, because this is the core to Ukraine's recovery. Not only in terms of economic development or increasing productivity, but about humans' life, about quality of life, about living standards in Ukraine, and about moving our country forward. Because recovery is all about people, and it will be made by people. And we actually prepared a short presentation for your consideration here. And the first slide that I would like to start with is definition of human capital, because it's kind of a question that is almost undefined, because there are different thoughts and perspectives on how to define the human capital. Some research organizations or international organizations think that human capital is all about skills and knowledge and competences. Some of them are adding living conditions to the equation. But we think that this is a combination of education, health, living conditions that are actually affecting the economic productivity and that are actually affecting the economic development of the country. And that is why you need to understand that this is very important to analyze the human development index, to analyze the human capital development. Despite the fact that Ukraine is actually ranked as one of the most developed countries in terms of human capital development, in this graph you can see that Ukraine is a bit behind new member states of the European Union and also developed countries. And that is why the productivity of Ukraine's workforce is lagging behind, and we need to invest more and more into human capital development. And we do understand that it changes with crisis, because we actually faced a huge crisis, financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Then the invasion has started 2013, 2014. Then the COVID hit strong Ukraine's economy, but we were resilient. And then the full-scale invasion on the 24th of February 2022 has started, and affects again and again the human capital development in Ukraine, both in terms of reducing the quality of life, and also reducing the economic productivity of our country. And once we are thinking of human capital development, we need to understand that this is all about the population and also the productivity that is affected with this population. There are different groups of people that are working, that are accounted as a labor force, that are employed or unemployed, and they are all bringing us for further day after day, and they are all the reason why Ukraine is actually resilient, why Ukraine is fighting for our freedom, for the whole civilized world. And we need to be aware of the very difficult demographic situation that was before the war. We are now a country of 37 million of people. We used to be a country of 37 million of people before the war, and the demographic was caused by aging population, by high mortality rates, by low birth rates, and this was a problem. And we were aware of this problem, and the government of Ukraine and also the president's office were doing a great job in terms of investing into healthcare reform, which was one of the most successful reforms in Ukraine, alongside with decentralization, as was mentioned before. Also improvement of social standards, improvement of education system. But this was not enough, to be honest, and now the full-scale invasion has changed a lot, and now we do understand that there are millions of people abroad, and we do not know exactly how many people will come back to Ukraine, and we do not know exactly how many people are staying in Europe, are staying in aggressor states. There are approximate numbers in different studies, for example, in Center for Economic Strategy or Center for Razumko or Eurostat. They all have approximately same numbers, and we do understand that from 3.8 million to 4.3 million people are now in Europe, and additional 1.5 million are now in aggressor states. And this is a big problem for Ukraine, and this is a big problem for Ukraine's recovery, because those people, they need to come back someday. And we do understand that there are factors like security reasons or defense reasons. They are affecting all those people, and their perception on how they are planning to come back. But at the same time, 11% of people who are now abroad, they are planning to come back. At the same time, at least 7% of them, they made a decision to stay in Europe or in other democratic states. And this is the problem, because we need to convince those people to come back after winning the war, and to contribute to development of human capital in Ukraine and economic complexity and productivity of Ukraine's economy. And together with UNDP, we started this fantastic exercise called financial costing of impact of war on human capital. And we were thinking and wrapping our minds on how to do that, because We have a lot of different studies available on the market, like rDNA 1, rDNA 2, and they are all focusing on damages and losses, but no one actually calculated the financial cost of the war to human capital of Ukraine. And we started thinking of that, and today, the first time I'm presenting the preliminary results. I'm saying preliminary results because we still will have some consultation phases and adjustments to the model. And there were actually two factors that were influencing this study. It's the population forecasting. Both in terms of natural tendencies in Ukraine, like aging population or reducing number of people. That was traditional tendency before the war, and now after the war, and at the same time willingness of people to come back to Ukraine. So those are factors that are contributing to those economic models, and also direct impact of war to education, living standards, and healthcare, which is huge, and we need to understand that there will be a loss of gross value added after the war is ended. And here are some slides. You will be able to download them because today it's too less time to go it in deep. But we do understand that the labor force in Ukraine will most probably decrease from 15 million to 14.5. We do understand that the number of people residing in Ukraine now and in the first years after the war will be relatively lower than it used to be before. So this means that the contribution to gross value added will be a bit lower. And we do understand that this will have a direct impact on the gross value added creation in Ukraine. Here you see yellow and blue. Yellow, it's the effect of the number of people that are residing in Ukraine right now and creating the gross value added. And this effect is reducing in time because people will most probably come back and they will contribute to economy's development. But at the same time, there is a negative effect of those bad negative impacts that are happening right now to Ukrainian people in terms of lower access to education, lower access to healthcare, to living conditions, and it will last for some time, and there is a gap between those negative effects happening right now and the gross value added and GDP formulated in the upcoming future. So we see that the effect in the future would be huge, and we have three scenarios, and the conservative scenarios is around $255 billion in 10 years as a loss to gross value added that we could create, but will not if don't make any adjustments to the existing policy, and if don't make good moves. But furthermore, I would like to stress out that if we want to recover with the pace of from 7 to 10%, that is articulated by many international organizations, international financial institutions, by the government. We will most probably lack from 3 to 4.5 million people that need to contribute to recovery. And here is the question: how are we gonna return forced migrants from EU? How are we gonna attract foreign talents into Ukraine's recovery? And those are all questions that needs to have answers. But at this particular moment, we actually need to focus on three major initiatives. So the first would be retaining human capital in Ukraine by creation of enough opportunities for people to actually to work, to live, and to have a decent personal development by actually continuing those structural reforms that has happened before. I'm talking about healthcare reform, I'm talking about social sector reform, I'm talking about education reform. Those are crucial in terms of retaining people in the country. The second one is returning people who were forced to leave the country after the victory or after the point of time when they are certain about their future in the country. And for this particular matter, we need to be aware that there are factors that are influencing their decisions. So the first factor would be that those people are patriotic and they want to belong to Ukraine, and they still work for the future of Ukraine, and they contribute to Ukraine's development despite the fact that they are not in Ukraine, but we do understand why. And the second one is the comparison of those countries, let's say Ukraine and those countries that are people residing right now. And we need to invest into comfortable living infrastructure. And this is all about fast recovery, and this is all about creation of those opportunities for infrastructure build. We need to invest into competitive working infrastructure, because economy should be developing faster than it used to be before, because we dropped for at least 30% last year. And we need to invest into a comprehensive environment for personal development. And here is the culture, here is the in environmental protection, here is the education, science, and so on and so forth. And this is the second stage. And the third stage would be to wrap our minds. Do we really want to attract best possible foreign talent into Ukraine's recovery? And this would be the three questions that we need to address during the Ukraine's recovery process after our successful victory in the war. Hopefully it's gonna end soon, and we will win this war. And then we will have an opportunity to build an even better country than it used to be before. And we should be proud of our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dmytro. Actually, very rich analysis, and I want to ask many questions, but let us keep it for the discussion stage, and let's move to another speaker. And before we listen to another speaker, I suggest that we all watch the animation. This is actually premiered today, and this is the animation by NGO Save the Children UK. Please show us the animation.
Before the war, I really liked it in Mariupol. My sister and I went to school every day. Our classroom was new. Everything there was new. Books, desks, everything. There were 3 playgrounds in the park, and I played there with my friends. I was very happy. At the beginning of the war, we lived in our apartment, but as the fighting came closer, Mum said it was too dangerous to stay. A friend offered us a house next to the drama theatre, and Mum said we would be safer there. There was nothing, no light, no water, no heat, so everyone cooked on fires. I don't remember what time it was when the shelling began. Mum told us to go into the corridor and take shelter. I took the dishes to the kitchen and my sister said, "No, stop." And at that moment, a shell hit our house. I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd been there. We all went to the bomb shelter and sat there for an hour and a half. Then we quickly packed all our things, got into the car and left. But there were lots of cars leaving the city.
Заберіть моїх дітей, будь ласка.
My mum kept telling us everything would be okay, saying it would all be over soon. Whenever we started to get upset, she would get us to draw and play. First, we arrived at Tokmak, but we were told that there was a curfew and we could go no further. We had to spend the night in the car because there was no other option. It was very cold, about -11. When we reached Zaporizhia, we were told what happened to the drama theatre. We had been there just a day before. We have been living in this apartment for a year now. There are shops and a park nearby. We're good here. Mum looks after us and Dad has work. My brother had trouble sleeping. He was shaking, afraid of loud noises, and didn't speak. He slept with the light on for a long time. He was afraid of the dark. It took him almost 3 months to get better. I want to return to Mariupol, but when it's been rebuilt, when life has returned to normal there. I dream that we will have our own apartment and I will have my own room. First of all, we will go to meet our grandparents. And then, we will play again in the square.
Well, Narmina, that's a really powerful animation. Thank you very much for showing it to us. And Narmina Strishenets, she is the Conflict, Humanitarian Policy and Advocacy Advisor at Save the Children. And I know Narmina very well from the past because we used to work very close together, me at UNDP Ukraine, Narmina at UN Women Ukraine, and she was part of UN family for many years. Now she's staying here and working on humanitarian response to Ukraine's children and families. And of course, this video is probably touching everybody, but at least there are triggers for Ukrainians for sure. I had the siren, I became anxious immediately, and I think there will be many kind of triggers like that for Ukrainians for the years to come. So please tell us more about the problems that children and families are experiencing, but most importantly, how we can all together resolve them.
Thank you, Olena. Well, Save the Children partnered with BAFTA award-winning animation director Jonathan Hodgson and Ukrainian illustrator Anna Ivanenko to create this animation. It is a real story, as you have seen, and it perfectly grasps all challenges that many families and children in Ukraine are currently facing. So we have the whole generation of children uprooted, separated from their families, from their loved ones. We have particular challenges that are characteristic to young people, to children, to women, to older people, to people with disabilities. And thinking about recovery, it is essential to link it up to humanitarian response and to understand that there is no universal solution for everybody. Every single person has its unique experience. And in our recovery effort, we should definitely tailor this approach to different individuals of different age, of different gender, different background. So when we're talking about children, one of the major challenges, among major challenges, is that many children are missing out on education. And these challenges are quite different for children and young people who stayed in Ukraine and for those who became refugees and moved abroad. And we have heard from Dmytro and we know that this is a huge amount of people. More than 8 million people moved as refugees abroad, and 40% of those people are estimated to be children. However, in host communities, if we're talking about refugee children, there is different approach in different countries. And it is estimated that 70% of refugee children are not now formally registered in schools. So just one of the examples in Poland, one of the major host countries for Ukrainian refugees, we have about 1.6 million refugees. And about 500,000 are children of school age. 2 out of 3 are not formally registered in school. So many families still, of course, mindful and hoping to come back to Ukraine. They are not registering their children in school. And we all know that, especially in winter, Ukraine suffered from huge missile attacks, blackouts, attacks on power infrastructure, which impacted hugely access to online learning. And we know that not only for children who are abroad and they need to access their classes remotely, but also for internally displaced children who are in Ukraine. And those on the front lines, basically, who stayed in the conflict-affected communities and they couldn't attend in-person classes, they couldn't access their online learning. And we know from COVID, as now children in Ukraine facing compounded effect, not only from war, but also from 2 years of remote learning during COVID pandemic. So this is a huge problem. And learning is not only about education, getting knowledge. It's also about peer support, socializing, getting this experience that children should have. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen for many children in Ukraine. Another issue is that so many educational institutions are destroyed in Ukraine. Ministry of Education estimates about 3,200 educational institutions, including schools, nurseries, universities and colleges damaged, and about 400 completely destroyed, which means that children will not be able to come back to those schools. And recently I have read a very heartbreaking story about children in Bakhmut school who are connecting online and just dreaming to come back to that school. But it's so impossible to imagine that cities that have been erased basically by hostilities, they will not be able to host any school children anytime soon. And this is our effort as a recovery. So thinking about rebuilding schools and re-equipment of schools, it is essential also to make them war resilient, inclusive, accessible, and inclusive to the needs of people, of children with special educational needs and with disabilities. And this is something to be mindful of in recovery efforts, just in rethinking the whole approach to new school environment. But also, apart from visible wounds, there are invisible wounds. This is mental health issue, and I think that all population of Ukraine is heavily traumatized. But for younger people, and as well for older people, that might be just a bit harder. And Save the Children conducted studies in European countries, in host communities, asking children about how they feel, how does it feel for them, all of this experience. And 3 out of 4 have reported that they have mental health issues. They definitely are traumatized, they are more anxious, they're afraid, they're less happy. It is harder for older teens over 16. It makes it a lot harder for them to connect to their peers and because probably they just understand a little bit more about all of the circumstances, and it poses for them a lot of questions and anxieties about their future. So surprisingly, the UN study, UNDP and UNFPA conducted a study of impact of war on youth, and surprisingly, children, when asked directly if they have any mental health issue, they would say no. But if they would be suggested to have free, anonymous hotline or psychosocial support, most of them would say, yes, I would use that. So it just indicates mental health stigma and some, desire of people, young people, not to look weak and not seeking help. But this is crucial in recovery effort, embed mental health programming in schools, provide tailored mental health and psychosocial support to different groups of people, but for children particularly, because it impacts the future and future of Ukraine. Moving to vulnerabilities that different people have. Definitely one of the most vulnerable groups of people are children with disabilities and children in institutional care and residential care. And this is a huge problem for Ukraine even prior to war. Ukraine had one of the largest institutionalized children in orphanages and other modalities of institutional care. That has the largest population in the world, and one of the largest in the world, and one of the largest in Europe. And this is something that should be improved, and this is very much commendable that the delegation of the government of Ukraine is now in London, learning from the British colleagues how to make this transition to family-based alternatives. And that should be definitely embedded into recovery process. Alternative care, family-based care, ability for children, especially for smaller ones. There is a strong call from civil society organizations for moratorium of placing children under 3 years old in orphanages and institutional care, because no child should be placed in institutional care just on the grounds of disability. And that is a very challenging question, but it needs to be addressed as a part of recovery process. One of the positive things about recovery and engagement of different groups of people is that young people are very much willing, as again Dmytro just showed, are very much willing to come back to Ukraine. And we see from Save the Children study, Plan International conducted study, talking to young people, 3 out of 4 want to come back. And about 66% those who are in Ukraine and who haven't moved anywhere just during the first year, they don't even plan to do that. So it shows that young people want to stay. It's just about their future and about how strengthening protection systems. When asked again what would factor their coming back to Ukraine for those who are in host countries, a lot of them mention education, job opportunities, demining and creating safe cities. And we understand that demining and mine clearance and mine risk education is a huge part, again, of recovery and educational efforts of Ukraine, because with such huge territory of mines and unexploded ordnance, this will be continuous risk to all people who are in Ukraine and who will come back in the future. So just moving from briefly, because I'm speaking, just about other vulnerable groups. We shouldn't forget about older people, because Ukraine is definitely an aging country, and we have a quarter of population older than 60 years old, and to understand that if younger people are more resilient and they can just keep up with challenges, for older people it's much more complicated. So business, private sector, donors, states investing and supporting Ukraine should be thinking also about older people, and as well leveraging that huge potential now unleashed with women and girls. And young people, again, in their interviews highlight that gender issues are really important to them, because we now see that a lot of women who are working and supporting their families, they're the backbone of Ukraine's economy right now. They're supporting volunteering, they're on the front lines. So Ukraine should just use this potential and build back better.
Thank you very much, Narmina, and thank you. Basically, when you mentioned other people that we shouldn't forget, that's probably the best segue to the next speaker. And Daria Sydorenko is a lawyer who has been for many years working in Ukraine, advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities and also favorable environment for civil society development. And at the moment, she is the chief executive of the League of the Strong, which is the union of organizations of persons with disabilities advocating for their rights and also for the inclusive recovery. So Daria, my question to you, you always say in all of the events that while we all advocate for the fast recovery, it's not always good, because recovery has to be fast, but at the same time, it has to be proper with due respect to accessibility requirements. It has to be implemented in an inclusive manner. So is it possible to do that, and what can we do together to make sure that the recovery is inclusive?
Thank you for representing me, and thank you for the invitation. I do believe that it's possible, because we do not have other chance. Only to recover, inclusive recovery, we have a chance to return people from abroad to Ukraine. And just to see the picture, before the full-scale invasion, there was 2.7 million people with disability in Ukraine. But generally, it is said that 10% of population have some kind of disabilities. It means that there were approximately 4 million people with disability. But situation are getting worse. We know that during this war, Russia-Ukrainian war, lots of people, veterans and civilians, are being injured. all the time. And for now, we do not know exactly how many people potentially receive disabilities, officially or not officially, because there are a huge amount of people who really have disabilities, but it's not official. So I'd like to say that this huge amount of people is a potential human capital, and we need to use it in the future. But why we can't do this now? Because we have some barriers, and I give you only some examples of that. For example, regarding the employment of people with disability. In Ukraine, only 17% of people with disability work. If we're comparing with European countries, the worst situation in Greece is 38%. But even if we comparing these two numbers, we see that Ukraine's situation is much worse. That's why we need some changes of legislation, and now we are doing that. Secondly, we should understand that we have lots of barriers, physical barriers, architecture barriers. Its influence including on commute of people with disabilities, because they can't go, we do not have generally accessible public transport, accessible streets, and lots of people with disabilities can't get out of their flat at all. Mainly they live in their flats. And even their flats, sometimes they can't live independently. They need to receive assistance. Then we should think that disabilities demand additional cost of life. I mean that people with disabilities should pay extra money for medicine, for the private transport, because mainly they can't they need to buy private cars, or they need to order the taxi, because again, we do not have accessible public transport. Also, continuation of institutional cares. We should talk not only about children who are in this institutional care, but adult, because we have huge amount of people who live there. They are segregate. They do not live independently, but they can. They can do that. And for this reason, we need to pay attention to social services in the community, and to introduce lots of types of social services. And lots of people can return to their community with this segregation institutional cares, including adults and children with disability. Why I'm talking to you about that? Because I believe that when we're talking recovery process, it's really important to think about inclusion, because inclusion not only for people with disabilities, inclusion for all of us, and its influence on the quality of life. And this is why it is one of the key components to encourage people abroad to return to Ukraine, because we demonstrate that the quality of life in every community will be growth. And also, the last bullet point, I'd like to say that when we're talking about recovery process, we should think about inclusion recovery process, but also we should think not only about physical or architectural. We need to think about other areas of our life: educational, economic, digital, information. And only on this complex we will really increase our life, and we really rebuild human capital of Ukraine. We should think out of the box, and again, the key component of this is inclusive part of the reconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daria. Colleagues, literally 3 minutes before we start interaction with the audience, I would like to ask you the so-called lightning question. So I ask the question, you just say 2-3 words, not more. Just the ideas. One of the topics we are supposed to discuss is the needs in terms of the labor force in Ukraine, in terms of upskilling and reskilling. So considering all of those challenges that you discussed and all the priorities and needs in Ukraine, if you think of the jobs which are required and consequently the programs for these jobs, educational programs or vocational training, what would be those jobs that are required in Ukraine at the moment? Literally, your ideas.
I would actually think of economic geography, because currently there are like relatively safe regions of Ukraine that are booming, that are developing, and people are moving to western part of Ukraine, to central part of Ukraine. The services sector is increasing, IT sector is increasing in those regions. Some SMEs are moving and benefiting from the governmental program that was launched last year.
That's a bit more than 2 words.
Yeah, but my two words is think about economic geography and reskilling, because you need to balance demand and supply.
Thank you
economic
so much.
Geography, demand and supply. 4 words.
Thank you. Daria?
I'd like to say, without my side, we see that we do not have, there is not enough people who are very well in inclusive who are very awareness about inclusive process in what it means in reality. We know about this generally, but okay, you need to build this on 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters or lower.
You mean engineers right now, right?
Like
engineers with knowledge of
with,
universal
yes,
design principles, accessibility
yes,
standards, this kind of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good idea. Narmina, any idea?
I would say participatory approach. We should ask first and then suggest, because all people have different interests, and though we're all focused on digitalization, IT, technology, it's great, and Ukraine is very strong on that, but just we should ask and ensure youth participation and participatory approach for all people.
Yuliia?
Like from my side, we definitely see at the government level the lack of specialists in rehabilitation. When we are talking about kind of civilized, rehabilitation, we also see the problem of social services providers. I mean, caregivers, the NGOs providing social services, social workers in a way that they could provide the real help. And the third it's mental health specialists, psychologists. This is also a big gap in Ukraine, and I can talk in more details about it, but it's evidence-based gaps in those professions I'm working in, the sectors I'm working in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yuliia. This is actually one of the questions also asked through the online platform, that recovery of the human capital is not only about all those things that we are discussing, but also largely about resilience and mental health of individuals, and exactly professionals in this area are strongly needed. There are a few additional comments here, but I think, Narmina, we will address them a bit later in the stage. It's to you, but maybe at this stage I suggest we go to the questions from the audience. I see Zuzana probably was the first one. Let me ask you to ask your question. Invite you.
Thank you. Very good to see you here, all of you. My name is Zuzana Zalnova, Raoul Wallenberg Institute, Sweden, and I have a question continuing what Olena actually asked now about building human capital. So the question is probably to Dmytro, but maybe others will be also able to answer that. Where do you see the role of universities in all these efforts? As we see, and I really like Lesia's comments about the dogs let out previously, there are also analytical watchdogs, there are also innovative watchdogs, and there might be a role for universities to actually fit in. But there is a challenge when we also heard a lot about short and long-term perspective. Academic institutions are not the ones, usual suspects, to be supported in these early stages of the recovery processes. So where you would see the role of universities and how you'd like to support them to empower human capital, to be ready for the labor market, to encourage people to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, I can take this question. Thanks a lot for raising such important angle, because universities, education, despite the fact that Ukraine is ranked one of the top in terms of percentage of people who obtain tertiary education or higher education, this is not the one indicator that we should look at, because the quality of education is another indicator. The commercialization of research and development, of R&D, the science. Fortunately, we have a very good Minister of Education that is currently appointed. He was doing fantastic job in Junior Academy of Science. This is a special program for school students. And it was actually aimed at the creation of a potential creation of creative thinking for younger generations, for them to develop. But it's not only about universities. It's a bit broader question of education ecosystem, where you have universities in place. And there are new, not only state universities, but also private universities that are emerging and that are bringing foreign talent into the pool, and they are increasing their institutional capacity. There is also online education, lifetime learning. There is also some organizations that are supporting leadership potential, or let's say Ukraine Academy of Leadership, or some other institutions. And this is a very broad infrastructure. But if I would need to answer about the role of education, it's crucial, because this is something that creates potential, that increase productivity, that actually increase the level of quality of life for those people that are living in Ukraine. And also, what is very important in terms of education, I think that we are on the path of EU integration, and we should basically leverage out of this process, and to get a better access to those available programs that are in Europe, like Horizon Europe, where universities are participating in large-scale projects and developing some innovative solutions. We are lacking it right now, and there is a potential that needs to be actually utilized.
Thank you very much, Dmytro. The lady in the third row, please. Please identify yourself before asking the question.
Thank you. My name is Maria Kurina. I'm human rights defender from Ukraine, Luhansk City, Human Rights House, Crimea, and Zmina. The government of Ukraine has created 24 working groups on the reconstruction, and it's a great job, and we are really grateful for the job which is done. Women rights organizations were contributing to the work of each of the group. One of my questions is how we can ensure the gender mainstreaming in planning and implementation and monitoring of recovery activities. And the other question is regarding civil society representation in the process. For all these 9 years, consistently, sometimes without any support, we, human rights community and women rights organizations of Ukraine, were building democracy, and were doing civil society mobilization, including in liberated territories in the east of Ukraine. We were working with Save the Children Sweden, for example, building the capacity for children human rights defenders, including in the East, and coordinated a lot of projects like Women of Ukraine, who, for example, were providing first help during the full-scale invasion because they were already coordinated together. They knew how to liaise with local government officials and business. How can we ensure that our expertise is included and the voices and needs and stories of these women that cannot overcome structural barriers can be included in the process of reconstruction? I'm really happy that at least Daria Sydorenko is included in the panel. For example, we with Oksana Potapova, who is working all these years in Eastern Ukraine, we are not invited to Ukraine Recovery Conference, unfortunately. We will be really happy to provide our expertise because we are true friends and allies of Ukraine, and our aim is to rebuild it better. So we are really happy to provide our expertise to government and all other counterparts. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. The human rights community is also always asking the challenging questions. But I think the invitation to Daria to join this panel as a speaker is the reflection of our sincere intention to strengthen the need for inclusivity of the process. And this is our shared understanding, since Yuliia is also on the panel. So maybe I will refer this question to Yuliia, as challenging as it is.
Yeah, it's always a good question when I'm on the panel, because I'm the one woman out of 10 deputy chief of staff of the office of the president. So I'm personally kind of interested in the inclusivity of the process. On the other hand, I believe it's important to show the leadership, women leadership and empowerment during the war, to show the cases when women showed they are the best, knowledges, they show the results in different sectors. As for me, it's not really fair to show women only victims and victimize, women society. However, the women and the girls were harmed more than men and boys. But I would suggest all of us, from the governmental perspective, from NGO perspective, from mass media perspective, from all the society perspective, to show these cases of women leadership and to try to engage more women in decision making. This is part of my questions, and I would like to add to university question. There is a good practice of Ukraine and Britain university twinning programs. British universities have have sister universities in Ukraine, and there are programs on dual degrees with British universities, and they show the good. Some universities show the good capacity in moving in that. So I would suggest that other countries also look forward to this type of cooperation with Ukrainian universities, because they definitely need to build more capacity in order to provide educational services and of a good quality. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yuliia, one question from the room, and then the next one from the online platform. The gentleman in the fourth row, please.
Thank you. My name is Lyvch. I'm Executive Director at the Center for Economic Strategy in Kyiv. Dmytro has already referred to our study on refugees, and I just want to give some update, as we in fact updated it based on another survey. So unfortunately, we see that situation is not going better. It is becoming worse. In end May compared to end December, we have additional plus 30,000 of refugees, and also in our survey in May compared to December, we have only 41% of respondents who are fully planning to return to Ukraine, compared to 50% in December. You could find some data in booklets that is in networking room. In terms of what we saw is that there are all refugees are different, and you need to understand it. There is no single portrait, and for we saw that there are three main groups. One group is the most important for the topic of this recovery conference, as they are those who had to run from those places that suffered damages and destruction. So in this case, we could directly influence human capital return to Ukraine by fast investment into recovery or rebuilding of housing and critical infrastructure. And for the second group, that are the sort of quasi-labor migrants, it is very important to move move to the EU free movement of people like as a longer term solution, not just this temporary protection, because experience of like Baltics and other Eastern European countries shows that if people could go back and forth to their native country and to the EU country, if they have job opportunities, they are not interested in staying in the EU just because they have some crappy job, because they fear they could not return. So it will be also important to have like this strategic understanding on the part of the EU. And finally, like the largest group are those who just fear for the life of their children, because like for one adult we have approximately one child, and for this group we just need to win the war fast, and like all help that we could get, both in terms of weapons and finance, is crucial in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lyvch. As I always say, in Ukraine there are many reasons to become more and more pessimistic every day, but we should always look for the other side of the coin. So basically, maybe somebody could comment from the other side of the coin, bringing us a bit more into the positive mood about the rebuilding of the human capital.
If we are talking about forced migration right now, the only positive, it is very difficult to find some positive positive dimensions, but at the very beginning, those people who were forced to migrate, they are now safe and secure, and this is good, because we didn't lose those people at the very beginning. The second point is that currently people who are now residing in Europe or other democratic states, they are forced migrant. They are not working migrants right now, and they are not diaspora. So if those people are becoming working migrants or diaspora, the probability for them to come back to Ukraine is decreasing a lot, many times. But if those people will make a decision to come back at a certain point of time, most probably our economy will benefit from the thing that is called collective know-how. There is a theory in economic development that you need to build a collective know-how in order to create better products and then show them on the market. So if those people were working in different environments, in different countries, in different circumstances, they gained some experience, they gained some knowledge, they were shown to a different perspective, and they are coming back to Ukraine after our victory, and we are able to create something new and show it to the world, and to become more competitive. So this is the bright side of this tragedy, I would say.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind you the statistic that 76% of youth would like to return. It's our future. It's our...
Yeah, this is true. People are willing to come back, but there are factors that are prevailing them to do so, and this is okay.
Thank you very much, Dmytro and Daria. Do you want to comment on this one? Yes, please. Or a question, asking a question. Okay.
Hello, I'm Oksana Potapova, women's rights activist and currently also a researcher at the London School of Economics. And not to repeat, the gender question has been partly answered. I want to bring up sort of a comment about the arguments that I've been hearing in preparation for this conference, specifically from the hard economists and from businesses, because this is the main theme of the conference in London, is to attract the business and to make the conditions for business in Ukraine as easy as possible. We understand it's important. However, I think we also have to be realistic about the reasons business is involved in anything. It's profit, it's gaining money also for the business itself. And some of the discourses around the visions of business, both Ukrainian and international, on what conditions are necessary, are quite worrying to me. I'm referring, for example, to the vision of of the recently issued statement of Ukrainian Association of Entrepreneurs that includes, for example, the director of Nova Poshta and other companies. I don't know how influential they are in the process, but some of their proposals include oversimplification of labor regulations, for example, deregulation of businesses, lowering taxation, basically making life very easy for the big business, but not so easy for the people, for the workers specifically, and also sort of privatizing pretty much any areas of social and welfare infrastructure, such as education, medical infrastructure, etc. Again, we are democracy, we can have debates about it, but I myself, since I've been reading these statements, have been looking for sound arguments to respond to them. So my question to all of you, in fact, as representatives of government, as economists, as civil society concerned, and listening to you, I deeply believe that we share this value that, rebuilding Ukraine is investing in people. What would you say to those who may be coming to this with the mindset of, whatever is not profitable is not worth investing in? How would you respond from your positions and from your expertise? Thank you very much.
Looks like I've been talking too much, but again, human capital discussion turns to economic development discussion. There are different models on how to build the country, how to build the economy, and there are different opinions of associations, think tanks, civil society organizations, the government. Some of those reforms are good. In particular, today morning I posted the news that there is a working group under Ministry of Economy working on the regulation, and it's timely. We need to do so because this is the creation of better business enabling environment in Ukraine, and this is the opportunity for us to attract both domestic investment and foreign direct investment into our economy, and we should be aware of the examples of post-disaster and post-war recovery in different countries, because we've been analyzing that last year, and we analyzed 26 countries, and the role of private sector is huge in the recovery process. We are thankful to our international partners for this huge support, because it would be almost impossible to be such resilient as we are right now. But in the long run, we should think of the development of the private sector as well, and those reforms that you mentioned, the regulation, some part of privatization, building private-public partnerships, some tax reform, which is a subject to a huge discussion. We can stay here for days or even for months and discuss what kind of tax reform do we need in the country. But to be honest, this is not a subject of today's discussions. We are here discussing the human capital development, and we need to create incentives both for private sector to invest into human capital, and also for the government, and also for our international partner to partner up with civil society, to partner up with think tanks who are doing this kind of researches, to partner up with education facilities, with research facilities, and put it all together, because this is a huge challenge on how to build back our country, and we need to consolidate our efforts in this manner.
Thank you very much, Dmytro. Yuliia would like to add a few words.
Yes. Your question reminded me that our labor code in Ukraine was adopted in the 70s. So I'm pretty sure that some sectors need to be more progressive and need to be adjusted to the new realities. The other thing that I was also thinking about, almost all healthcare facilities are community or state-owned. Almost all education facilities are community or state-owned. Almost all social services providers are community or state-owned. And I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of room for business in all of this. But definitely we should think about balancing private and public interests and the interest of each person in this balance building.
Thank you very much, Yuliia. Before my laptop went off, I saw the questions to Narmina and also to Yuliia, so I'm going to ask those from the online audience. Narmina, the question to you was whether you are able to, because it seems that in your opening remarks you were mostly talking about children which went to the European countries. What about the numbers of those who were forcibly taken by the aggressor state? Do you have the number of those, and are you following up on the situation with those children? Whether you can say anything about the situation or verify the figure? I believe it was mentioned 16,000, but whether it is 16,000 or not, maybe you can comment on that. And the second one was regarding something that you also mentioned in your opening remarks about deinstitutionalization. The question is, what specifically can we all do to make that happen? What actions can we prioritize? And I think here both you and also Yuliia can comment.
Okay, the first question about forcibly transferred children. I think this has made huge amount of headlines, and as representative of child rights organization and more generally Save the Children is a part of Child Rights Network in Ukraine, a coalition of NGOs working on child rights issues. Everyone is following very closely the issue of forcibly transferred children. And right now, we know that to a certain extent, it is politicized, and I'm not touching that part of it. But young people asked all over Europe and in Ukraine about how they see their future and why they want to come back, basically, to Ukraine, is also accountability and getting justice for violations and crimes against generally civilian population, but also children in Ukraine. And right now we're following, of course, all studies and tracing of children. There are various numbers. Yes, we also have 16,000, 19,000. There are numbers of hundreds of thousands of children forcibly moved to Russia. So right now, Child Rights Network and other organizations, I know they partner to trace and reunite families, because this situation is very much complicated. Some children have parents, some children do not have parents. That makes it a lot harder to trace them and reunite. It makes it a lot harder to ensure this long trip for someone. It's like thousands of miles to go to Russia to find their child and get them back. So it's just, yes, we're following this question, and this is just a call for states, for donors to ensure child rights expertise, to invest in proper investigation and prosecution of crimes against children, to make justice served to those who suffered from this unjustified war in Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Narmina. I apologize, but we have to wrap up a little bit, so maybe on deinstitutionalization.
Deinstitutionalization. There is the whole suggestion, and again, the 16 NGOs just last week issued recommendations to the government of Ukraine with a comprehensive view on how this care reform may happen. So one of the first steps for donors is just to stop investing new funds into institutional care, but support family-based alternatives, and just to ensure proper support to local, regional, national government, to ensure proper number of child rights experts and child protection experts, and to create awareness-raising campaigns for people in Ukraine to recognize this problem and help children from institutional care to move to family-based care. Every child deserves, actually.
Thank you so much for the civil society view. Now probably the authorities view, Yuliia.
About the deported children, first of all, I would like to say, I have to say that it's very difficult to verify how many children were deported, because a lot of territories are occupied. What we are trying to do is now to use digital tools with digital, and to verify whether children were noted in any of Ukraine registries. From the other side, we have information verified by General Prosecutor Officer about the information about 19,000 children deported, and only 373 children were returned. It is a very difficult process to return children. Mostly supported, I would say, by NGOs, and here I would like to say thanks to NGOs who help us to return children from Russia Federation. It is really difficult to talk to them. We don't have the direct communication with Russia Federation. That's why we try to use different sources of information and to use different partners to help us with this. In terms of the institutionalization and the kind of reform of children protection and child protection in Ukraine, it's kind of tricky questions, because yes, we have children, orphans in institutions, and we plan how to work with this. But at the same time, we have a lot of children who have parents and still are based in institutions. There's more than 20,000 of such children in institutions. And here we have the task is very difficult, because here you have to support family. You have to provide that level of care and that level of support and the social support and benefits and trainings for parents in order for them to keep their child in the family and not to give their child into the institutions. And it is very complex. It's about education, it's about social sector, it's about health, and we have to and we are working as a country on moving forward in this topic. And what President mentions, that his ambitions is to kind of eliminate child facilities while he's president. That is, he personally puts a pressure on all of us to build the infrastructure for foster families, for adoption, for families to keep their child, to support families to keep their children in their families, and to return children from both EU and Russian Federation to families and not to the institutions.
Thank you very much, Yuliia. The last question, but please remember, you are the one who is keeping people from lunch.
Hello, my name is Ivan Verbitsky from Tzadov think tank. We were honored to actually work on that research on the impact of the war on youth, and I would like to ask you to read the full report, but one of our key findings was that there are different social groups inside the group of youth. For example, people from rural areas, people from low-income households, Romani people, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+ people. So how could we address the structural social inequalities when we speak and work on the human capital?
I believe the answer for this question is the number of people here in comparison to number of people that was during the previous session. From my perspective, it is easier to work on economics, on infrastructure, on building and construction. It is much more difficult to work on human capital, because you have to, from the very beginning, to understand that there are emotions, personal drama, that different circumstances. It is it's very individual in a lot of cases, and you have to be more creative to put more intellectual, let's say, resources and more international practice to solve those problems, because there is no single answer in a country. There is no country that we could say, okay, we will take experience of this country, and this experience will answer all the questions. So in this particular topic, I mean, in human capital development, we really have to be more innovative, more creative, and to have full scale of experience of different players.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm going to ask again one last question, and expecting really short answers as before to conclude our discussion. So basically, what makes you optimistic about rebuilding Ukraine's human capital? Just a few words. Why do you believe that all of that is possible? I hope you do believe that all of that is possible that we are discussing today. Can we start by Daria, maybe?
We have lots of challenges regarding human capital, but nevertheless, we can turn into these challenges into the way how we improve the current situation.
Thank you, Daria. Narmina?
I think resilience of Ukrainian people, whether they're in Ukraine or they're abroad, they're very much committed to solving the situation and come as a stronger nation.
Thank you, Narmina. Dmytro?
I think that Ukraine's recovery is all about the future of our people and will be made by our people, and the resilience and the willingness to live in the free and prosperous country is something that is motivating us each day and moving us forward to the bright future.
Thank you.
From my perspective, despite of war, we are both react as an emergency reaction and react strategically. So I believe that even during war, we put a platform for strategic things, for strategic reform, and this is something I believe in. And I believe that after the war, after we win this war, we become stronger, and stronger in terms of human capital development and the infrastructure we built for this development.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Daria Sydorenko, Narmina Strishenets, Dmytro, Lyvch, Yuliia Sokolovska. Colleagues, if you are interested in the surveys, videos which were shown during this discussion, please be in touch with us. We will share all of the links and all of the reports. Ivan has kindly encouraged you to read all of them. So thank you so much for being with us, and we are happy to work together with you on the initiatives that you may have now in your mind. Thank you.